When we talk about globalization, we're talking about more than just Europe, the US, and Asia. Today we're talking about Africa. And here with us today are two people who can tell us about Insead's Africa Initiative. Raadiya Begg, Director for the Africa Initiative, Program Director, and Loic Sadoulet, the Academic Director for the Africa Initiative. Thank you very much for coming down.
Having us.
Loic, let me ask you, just to begin with, what are the businesses that you're actually dealing with? When one thinks of Africa, one does not really think of business.
In Africa, we have, well, a couple of things. One is, obviously, people think of natural resources, but there are a lot more issues around, quite innovative issues, actually, around telecom companies. We see mobile payments industry emerging. We see mobile health issues, so using telecommunications to either detect pandemics or epidemics, or actually to help in the treatment of multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, for example.
So, for example, instead of putting in fixed lines telephones, I would imagine this is all wireless, and so they're really being catapulted into, well into the 21st century from going from nothing.
There's lots of leapfrogs, indeed. No fixed lines, you're getting cell phone lines. And now with the new lines, transcontinental lines arriving in Kenya, you're actually seeing quite a bit of internet access. So you're having a huge leap into the internet.
And Raadiya, this must more than accelerate the economic development of Africa. I mean, it must be on steroids down there. How can Insead help with this?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's at the very beginning still, and Insead has the unique opportunity to participate in the economic development. And certainly we are looking at sectors that are relevant to driving this economic development, as Loic said, the healthcare sector, technology sector, but also sectors such as energy, agribusiness, banking and finance. And then over and above that, you have areas such as entrepreneurship and innovation, where Insead is also clearly at the forefront of these areas. So what we're doing is trying to take this content and bring it into the programs, so that we can talk about the issues that face businesses in Africa and how our graduates can deal with this when they're out in the field working in Africa.
Which countries are the biggest investors?
Currently, I would say there's a big chunk of investment coming from Asia, so China, as well as India from Asia.
So that's mostly natural resources. I mean, can't think of, or is it labor as well?
Mostly natural resources. Infrastructure is a big area. And also, for example, in Madagascar, countries such as Korea have recently invested in huge amounts of land, as well as Japan, since they don't have the space for the agribusiness. So they lease land, for example, in Madagascar for agriculture.
From an academic point of view, you must get a lot of people from the Singapore area who would be interested in the Africa Initiative, or this teaches something that's applicable in Asia, or am I just off base here?
No, I think we're in a unique position, because it's now a unique position because we do bridge Europe, Asia, and Africa. One of the big issues is not only, we always think about China as extracting from Africa, extracting natural resources. But if you talk to companies like Huawei, who's a telecom equipment manufacturer, for them, Africa is also a market. And so one of the big issues in Africa is there's doing business in Africa. If you think of the number of traders that you have, Asian or Middle Eastern traders in Africa. So indeed, I think there's a couple messages there. One is, indeed, a lot of actors from emerging markets are seeing Africa as a new emerging markets to do business with. And there's also lots of lessons to be learned in Africa from ways of doing business in Africa for doing businesses in other emerging markets.
Okay, one issue that comes up, and it's not a very nice one, is corruption. We can't deny that it's there. I mean, how do you handle that, both as a teacher and as somebody who's teaching about doing business?
Is corruption a necessary evil? Well, we take a very firm stance around this on thinking that, no, there are very important ways of doing business without any corruption. So we bring speakers in, we have cases around this. We also have mechanisms that help companies avoid having too much rent-seeking behavior. One of these, we had a speaker last week in the MBA department talking about private equity. He said he has lived 7 years doing private equity in Africa and has never paid a single bribe, business-wise or in his personal life. And he says, sometimes it means things go slower, sometimes it means you miss markets, but little by little you build your reputation, which allows you to actually be a much more sustainable business in these economies.
So this is not a place to go in for a quick fix unless you're really ready to deal with kind of the corruption.
I think that's absolutely correct.
Most real business people are not going to do that. What kind of partnerships do you have? I mean, you can't be out there alone. So are you working with businesses? You're working with local entities?
So we work a lot with the nonprofit sector to write cases, for example. We also partner up with companies who are very active in Africa, in the African markets, for example, Vodafone, or various other companies who are have relationships with Insead. So whether it's for structuring courses, whether it's for bringing speakers into electives, whether it's for organising field trips, we partner up with these organisations across the various sectors.
The oil industry sends a lot of MBAs and executive development participants in our executive development programs. We also have a lot of the Nigerian banks, a lot of South African banks send people to our programs. The breweries, the South African breweries, send people to our programs, and Swire, the Swire Group, which owns Cathay Pacific, but also owns Tenley Tea. They have lots of executives coming in from Africa for the Swire Advanced Management Program. So we see quite a bit of businesses coming to Insead to get that global view. We also are a very active member of the Global Business School Network, which is a network of business schools in Africa. And we try to bring every year 2 African fellows to spend two months at Insead, both starting cooperations with the Insead faculty, learning some of the material that we teach and bringing some material for us to teach.
Where does the funding come from? It sounds as though if there are these executive education programs, that some of it's self-sustaining.
A lot of it is self-sustaining. And actually one of our message, Africa is a self-sustaining market. We just have to bridge these misconceptions and bring Africa to Insead and Insead to Africa.
How do you get students to go back to Africa once they've come out to do studies?
One of the big issues is the issue of the brain drain, and indeed people actually ask us the question quite often. By giving people opportunities, bringing people to Insead, are you not contributing to brain drain? Are you not picking all the talent out of Africa and sending them to work in London and Singapore, in New York and Paris? Well, there's a couple issues around that. One is 50% of our graduates, African graduates, actually go back and work in Africa. But that's not really the issue. I would not put it as a measure of success to have 100% of our graduates go back and work in Africa. I think African graduates have to go and work where the best opportunities are. So here's where Insead has a role to create opportunities in Africa for our African graduates and for our non-African graduates. Because one of the big issues is also disenclaving Africa. I would love to have more of our non-African graduates finding opportunities in Africa. That way we create brain movement rather than just brain drain.
Now, this is part of Insead's Social Innovation Center. So, I mean, how does it play in philosophically to the center? I guess that's a fairly obvious statement, but can you give me an example of how it came about, how the center of the initiative came about?
Well, one thing that we do want to make clear is in Africa, it is a real market, and there are many opportunities for companies to launch into that market. So it's not all about poverty, it's not all about disease and humanitarian aid. In fact, what we're trying to do with the initiative is help businesses, help the leadership of these countries to wean themselves off aid, to become sustainable and do good business in Africa. And what we see it playing a very important role in the Social Innovation Centre, since there are various initiatives ranging from the healthcare initiative to the humanitarian to the corporate social responsibility initiative and social entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship in particular is a very big area, or an area that is highly relevant to Africa. So what we're trying to do is take this geography, Africa, as a context and fill that with content across the centre. And this is not only restricted to the Social Innovation Centre, but across the institution. So when we're looking at supply chain management, when we're looking at finance, when we're looking at marketing and strategy, it's all relevant to all of these subjects. And I think it's important that we integrate that into the mainstream curriculum.
Are you in one center, or are you in many centers, or where do you go into the businesses, and how do you actually physically function?
we are part of the core of the school. So it's not, I am on the economics faculty, I am in the center, I am also, teaching in all of our programs.
In Africa, though, I meant in Africa. Where is when you do your Africa initiative, if you're going into
part
Africa?
of the core school. So I would say, like, for example, when we do projects with MBAs, we do real consulting projects for social organizations in Africa. This is part of the core MBA course, or core MBA program. It's an elective course. But if we look at the Safaricom Kenya mobile payment systems, it was part of a Vivendi executive program. So this is one of our normal, quote unquote, executive programs. Much of the activity, I mean, the philosophy behind the Social Innovation Center is that social issues and economic development becomes a core business interest. It is not social responsibility. That's only one part of social innovation. But renewable energy is another part. Sustainable supply chains are another part.
Mm-hmm. And we try to be physically present. So when we do the courses such as the Independent Field Studies Project, we're on the ground in South Africa, we're on the ground in Ghana with students, we're on the ground in Kenya. So we go out, allow them to have the field experience, they come back to Insead and continue working on that with faculty and with the client to have a particular output. But they certainly do spend time in the field, and that's part of the value proposition added to the curriculum through the initiative.
The demystification.
And what's on the plate for the future?
Several issues. Actually, one issue is helping to bring more African participants to Insead. Our model is we learn from diversity. So you have to have more of diversity in the classroom. So that's one of our very, very important points. But that means we have to be able to, number one, build the awareness about Insead and why Insead is relevant for an African participant. Number two is to source some of the African participants, to bring them to Insead. And the third part, which is also to have more African content into the program. We want to have many more African-based cases, African-based projects, and African-based speakers coming into the program.
I just think that this is a fantastic opportunity for Insead to go into new markets and also embrace new ways of increasing Insead's brand equity, particularly in these new markets, and also to add value to our strategic partners across the institution, because this is certainly a market that is, I believe in Africa. I'm from Africa, so I do believe in Africa, and I believe that we have a very important role to play in developing and helping to develop Africa.
Thank you very much, Loic and Raadiya, for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.